do you see bad mentors, older people that the young people might be connecting with that are kind of like their mentors that leading them in the wrong direction?
I'll tell you a quick story. There's a nonprofit leader that's working in the community here in Philadelphia. He will tell you that, his father, his uncle, some of his cousins, these are all older adults that were all part of the prison system as well, right? So whether they were stealing, whether or not they were dealing drugs, these were kind of his mentors. So by the time he got of age, it was almost like he was going into the family business.
Mike,
Chris, how are you?
thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
How did you get started supporting nonprofits in Philadelphia?
Well, I think the first thing is talk about where I came from. So I was in financial services. I worked for a few banks back in the day. And I, at the same time, I was teaching financial literacy out in the community and realized that I liked being out in community and I liked teaching people, right? Especially in underserved communities here in North Philadelphia and also West Philly. So I was looking for a way to make an impact. And so from there went into healthcare, senior healthcare, again, working in underserved communities in North Philly, West Philly. But that was senior healthcare, right? So just very small demographic. And so I figured I wanted to make a bigger impact. And there were a couple things that were happening. One, I was teaching financial services. I loved teaching people. The other thing was I was coaching Pop Warner football and loved working with the kids, loved interacting with them, loved being kind of like a mentor to them. One specific incident where we had a shooting at the field during a game. My son was playing in the game. Everybody ran. I ran out, grabbed my son. We all hid underneath the bleachers. And so that was actually the last day of my coaching career because my wife thought it was unsafe to be in that neighborhood and coaching. And this is around Temple, right? And so, it was something that was kind of taken away from me. I enjoyed working with the kids. It was something that was kind of taken away from me. So the fact that I was working in the community, I was teaching people and also working with young kids, and we had this violent incident that happened when I saw the opportunity with United Way, and they were looking for a community outreach manager who was specializing in violence prevention, everything just kind of clicked and lined up. And so I, came to United Way. I'm involved in, helping people get connected to violence prevention resources, but then also some other initiatives that United Way is involved in as well.
Were you a captain of your football team in high school?
I was. I was a captain of the football team many moons ago. And so it was just a way for me to just kind of like connect with the kids, teach them what I learned. And, I think that any adult that works with kids is a mentor. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a mentor tag, but if you're a coach or you're, a teacher or a counselor, you have the ability to have an impact on young folks. And so I took that role very seriously.
When did you first start coaching and mentoring young folks? How old were you?
This had to be about 15 years ago. Yeah. And so a lot of these kids that I coached are now young men. And so, with mustaches and beards and, long hair and, they come up to me and I don't recognize them. They recognize me and they come up to me and say, "Hey, Coach Mike." And so the fact that they remember me makes me feel like I had at least some small role or role in their life. And so it makes me feel good. Yeah. And to see that they're doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you can think about broken relationships in young people and maybe how the importance of having a strong parent or a strong father figure, what's the importance of, in addition to that, having other strong male figures in the community, in the area, like a coach?
Family is very important to me. I grew up with, two parents that were always around and involved. I have a wife, I have kids, and so we have a close bond. And so family's always been important to me. And so I see sometimes the lack of that family structure when I'm working with folks out in the community and how that has an effect on people. So whether it's a single parent, lack of a male role model or a motherly figure, that can have an impact on a child's life and the types of things that they get involved in. It's always great to have great guidance, right? But parents are not always equipped to be the best mentors in some situations, right? So like if you need someone to teach you how to be an entrepreneur or to teach you other life skills that maybe your parents are not equipped to teach, it's always good to be able to seek out organizations that have those types of services. So whether it's a mentorship program or a kid wants to get involved in the arts or sports or different job programs, it's always important to seek out mentors who have that expertise, right? And so I have mentors, right? So business mentors, people that mentor me in terms of nonprofit work that I do. So it's always important to have mentors in your life, and it's especially for younger folks.
Do you think there's a natural point in a young person's life where they're kind of at an age where they're like, I kind of want to like get away a bit from mom and dad and find like some other people to kind of latch onto, to kind of learn and kind of apprentice under or be influenced by even?
Absolutely. One of the things that young folks tell me, especially ones that living in Philadelphia and growing up in poverty, is they want to work, right? But they don't have access to, job programs or job training programs for young folks. And so through the work that I do with 911 and 211 and the work that we do, we're trying to connect people to some of those opportunities, but they're actively seeking out things, right? If they want a job, they don't know how to go about it. So, and parents sometimes are not, again, some of the best resources in terms of figuring out how to navigate that landscape, right? And so for a child that just wants to work or a child that wants to get involved in some type of positive activity, having a number like 211, which is, what United Way runs, where we connect people to those different opportunities, that's critically important.
So there's only so much you can really do to oversee that, the young people in a city are not having, food insecurity, that sort of thing. But what's a good way that you found to communicate to families that like, hey, here's a resource here. Hey, here's a food drive. Here's like a way that we can help them. How do you find it's effective to communicate that to families and even young people?
We do a lot of community work. So we do events. I have an outreach team that does 150 plus events per year, right? And so we're out there in the communities. We're at resource fairs and block parties, and we're talking to city council. We have partnerships with the city, with the police department, with faith-based groups, other nonprofit organizations. So there's no one particular way, right? I would say everything. We're doing everything all the time at once, right? We have some marketing campaigns that really kind of drive the messaging home around our 211 violence prevention resources, which is a partnership with the city of Philadelphia as well. And so, like I said, there's no one real way. We do a lot of listening sessions. So I'm at a lot of community meetings. I speak at town hall meetings. So we have a lot of community members that come out to those meetings. They voice their opinions about what they think is needed in the community and the types of resources that they would like to see. As a matter of fact, our resource database with 211, a lot of it was built through the response from community, right? So the community said, we need X, Y, Z, and so we're actively seeking out resources to meet the needs of the community. So whether they be, additional resources for veterans, additional resources for the BTQ community, additional resources for parents that were seeking summer activities for their kids, whether it's work programs, whether it's summer activities, whether it's camp programs. All of this was in response to listening to community and listening to what they felt that they needed in their communities.
Can you speak at all to the importance of local-based service in terms of, you're listening to the community around you. You're in Philadelphia. You're hanging out with the people here, rather than somebody saying, "Oh my gosh, we have this problem in the city. We need to make a federal change. We need to make some new laws or something, or some new grants in Washington." Versus what you do, which is you kind of hang out with the people here. You're listening to the people within a 20-mile radius. What's the importance of integrating really closely with your direct community?
That's a great question. So I would say it's twofold, right? The first is, everybody that we work with, especially with 211 and the organizations that we refer people to, these are people that are working in the community, right? They're real boots on the ground. They're doing the work every day to provide, food resources and mentorship training and job programs. And so we get feedback from them just as much as we get from our community members. The other thing is through 211, and particularly through the 211 Violence Prevention Helpline, everyone that staffs that line is a resource navigator that is based in Philadelphia, right? So that when people call into it, they will be talking to someone who lives in their neighborhood, right? In some cases, right? They can say, I'm in, Allegheny Avenue, and they say, oh, I live right around the corner from that. So they are people that are living in the neighborhood, referring other neighbors to resources that they may have taken advantage of themselves. And so it makes it really relevant to the community that we serve.
So if you take something like violence prevention, I'm sure that there's some nonprofits you work with that specify in that. But you're also helping out with sports programs for kids and food insecurity programs and maybe some housing insecurity. How is it how important is it to have this breadth of influence and helping out in multiple different ways, even though the violence prevention might be the key core? Tell me the significance of having a lot of influence in different aspects of a person's life.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic question, right? Because someone who is living in poverty, right, may be experiencing violence or vice versa. So someone who's experiencing violence may also be living in poverty, right? So they may not just need those resources, but they also may need food resources. They may need job programs. They may need housing programs. They may need food services, right? So when people call us, it's not just one thing that they need. They usually need a lot of things, right? And so what 211 tries to do is provide that holistic support for people, right? And so a lot of times when they call us, it's not just the first resource that they're asking about that we're providing, but our resource navigators are trained to kind of dig in, to ask additional questions. What about this? What about that? What about rental insurance? What about, scratch that. What about rental assistance? What about things like, electrical assistance? These are all things that people ask about, right? Domestic violence resources are also big on 211 as well. So for us, it's about trying to provide that wraparound service for people.
So you come from a bit of a financial background, so I'm sure that you need to market the nonprofits in a way that is going to be able to raise support. Tell me a little bit about, you have a certain story that you could kind of employ to get people to fund a nonprofit. It's kind of got that powerful sense, but it's not necessarily that one story doesn't cover the whole picture. And it's okay, so we're going to help, fund a nonviolence program. But it's but the real issue is the kids aren't being busy enough in middle school and high school.
Sure.
That's what really needs help. So how do you kind of with that financial understanding, allocate resources in a way that's going to be really meaningful for the long-term results? And how are you able to communicate that to a person who wants to help support, but they might only see kind of the short term?
I think the story is really trying to get people to see the long-term vision, right? And so in terms of violence prevention, a lot of the things that we do, right, in terms of giving people resources, and I heard it said that, in terms of financial empowerment, changing things that are happening in community, some of those things are may take years to do, right? To bring economic redevelopment to a particular area of the city. And so, so they take years to do, but if you look at the funding cycle for a lot of these nonprofits, it's usually 1 to 2 years, right? And so those two things don't really line up. So you've got a funding cycle for a particular organization that's 1 to 2 years, but we're saying that some of these changes may take up to a generation to take into effect, right? And so, the bigger thing is just to get people to understand that there takes constant, sustained funding over a longer period of time, right? And so it doesn't mean that we can't revisit grants every 2 years, but we want to make sure that funders are kind of in it for the long haul, right? So there's a long-term vision for what happens. And the other part of that is in terms of things like violence prevention, we're saying that you have to catch these kids at a young age, right? You can't try to deal with kids that are high school students that are already, getting into things that they shouldn't be getting into, hanging out in the streets, hanging out with the wrong crowds. You have to mentor kids at a very, very young age. And so what's happening now is, traditionally in the past, you would see these grants come up for violence prevention, but they were targeted towards high school students, right? And so by a lot of times that's too late. Mm-hmm. So what's happening now is this push towards mentoring kids that are younger and younger, right? Starting in elementary school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? Getting to those kids, getting them engaged in something that's positive, whether it's an activity or it's just a mentorship program or it's exposure to different job opportunities, trying to bring those organizations either into school or into bring kids out to those organizations. That's critically important in getting people exposed to those opportunities at a young age.
I've done quite a decent bit of camp counseling and working with young people
Sure.
In my life. And it's even on film sets, I'll work with, 10-year-olds. And it's just remarkable how people do not understand how much of a human being, like an elementary age kid is. And what you're saying here, I had Children First comp director on, and she said violence prevention starts in elementary school.
Absolutely. And just to go back to something that you talked about, and we talked about holistic support for families and for individuals. Quick story, I work with an organization that is kind of a teen hangout in West Philadelphia. And so, they mentor kids. They also teach them music production. They hire the engineers and teach them both music creation and also music production. But the first thing that they do is they talk about their home life, right? Are you hungry? Are you getting enough food at home? What's going on? Because if their home life is not okay, then they're not going to listen to the message that you have in terms of mentorship, right? I mean, when you're struggling, right, and your family is struggling, right, that's your biggest concern. That's the only thing that you care about. And so they make sure that the kid is whole first, right? School's going okay, food is okay, home life is great, and then they start to talk about ways that they can mentor the kid.
So I went to church in high school, and we went on a few short-term missions trips, which is basically just for the people going on the trip. It's you raise all this money, you go to some third world country, and you hang out for 2 weeks and then leave. It's a great experience for the people going on the trip, less so there wasn't that much of a lasting impact. The kids we hung out with loved hanging out with us, of course, but I think there's a real importance to saying sitting down with the young person saying how's home life, are you hungry, to have that continuing mentorship going to the point where 15 years later they remember you and oh yeah, I remember when Mike was coaching me. So
sure. Yeah, critically important, right? And we're seeing that more and more that they need that mentorship starting from elementary school, as we said, and going all the way up through high school, right? It can't just be a one and done thing. First of all, there's a trust issue, right? Sometimes folks in the community, they see these organizations, they're kind of fly by night. They're here 1 year and gone the next, right? And so sometimes they have difficulty believing that you're going to be around for the long haul. Right? But if you're providing that mentorship, year after year, you're providing food resources year after year, if you're providing, job training, right, coaching year after year, they start to trust what you're doing, and it's a relationship that continues, like I said, from elementary school all the way out through high school, and it makes a real impact on people's lives.
People are looking at you wondering if you're going to stick around.
Exactly.
Is the community becoming more violent?
I guess it would depend on what you mean more violent. I would say that if you look statistically, crime is down in Philadelphia, right? I think it was down in 2024 by 39-40% around. And that's a real testament not only to the police department, but also these organizations that are providing real services in the community, right? Who are getting people to change their lives, not focus so much on the street, but job opportunities, housing security, home, food resources, that type of thing. There's a lot of people that are providing resources in conjunction with the police department that are making a real difference in community. Then there's the other side where you see these mass shootings that are happening, right? Like the one we just had at the rec center a couple of days ago. Several people were unfortunately injured, including several children. And you don't feel like there's a difference, right? And so sometimes people's reality doesn't match up with what's happening statistically, right? When you see things that are happening on the news, but in your mind that statistically we're headed in the right direction. And so, until people can kind of feel it for themselves and they feel safer and they feel like, my neighborhood is safe because, crime is down, but also there's resources available for people to take advantage. Until they feel that, I think there's going to be, people's perception versus the reality of what's actually going on.
What do you say to the, soccer mom in Bucks County who doesn't go down to Philly because she thinks it's dangerous here?
I can understand. I can understand that sentiment, but at the same time, there are some really great neighborhoods downtown in Philadelphia that are relatively safe, right? There are safe spaces for kids to go to, right? Whether it's through a nonprofit organization, whether it's through organizations that do sports or music, there are safe spaces for kids to turn to, and that's what we try to help connect people to as well.
I found it super interesting. You said earlier that a lot of the violence prevention programs are targeted at high school students, and you said at that point it's too late, which is so interesting because I think a lot of people don't really think about there being kind of that point where the cake is baked.
Exactly.
At what point would you have to, if you had to guess, at what point do you feel like the point is a little too late?
I think by the time they start high school, teenagers, just through most people's experience, that they don't want to listen, right? And so they're influenced more by their friends, but then also nowadays by social media, right? What they see on social media has a bigger influence sometimes than their parents. And so by the time they enter that age, they're being influenced by a lot of other things other than parents. So we want to catch kids when they are in elementary school, preferably 5th, 6th grade, and equip them with the skills to deal with what they're going to see once they reach high school. So the peer pressure, the stuff that they see on social media, they have the ability to kind of filter that through the lens of what they've been taught at a younger age.
How do you find social media potentially propitiating violence?
Great question. Has a big influence on it, right? And so a lot of times some of these beefs that some of the teenagers are having, they start on social media. Or they could, they start on social media and then they escalate in the school, or they start in the school and they escalate on social media, right? Whether it's through Instagram, whether it's through Facebook. There's a thing called drill music that a lot of kids are, they're, teenagers that are bragging about, shooting people, right? And see people, they see this, right? And they become desensitized to what's going on, right? And so it's having a huge impact on our young folks, right? And so it's not great. And I think that's one of the things that we have yet to kind of solve for, because we can provide these resources for young folks, but in terms of trying to offer some type of counter programming to what they're seeing on social media, whether it's the violent images, whether it's the beefs that start online, whether it's the people gathering, where someone says, hey, show up at XYZ, and then chaos happens. These are all things that happen on social media, right? And then you see them happening in the world, and so it's something that we haven't been able to wrap our arms around in terms of how to deal with social media and what kids are seeing.
What would you say is it that in a young person kind of gets them on that path towards wanting to pursue that violence? Is it they think it's cool to be violent? Is it come from a place of fear, from that food insecurity, or for something earlier? What is it in a young person that gets them onto the path of saying I'm desensitized to violence and I'm almost wanting to pursue that now?
To me, it starts with that lack of family guidance, right? Either not having that role model or that mentor in their life that can kind of steer them away from that, and then just being influenced by other kids, folks that they hang out with, stuff that they see on social media, and not really having the ability to kind of filter out what they're seeing. And folks that it might be if they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, that becomes cooler than doing something that's kind of positive with their life. But they're never exposed to the positive things, right? They're never exposed to mentors and activities that would kind of that they'd have an opportunity to choose that versus choose hanging out with the wrong crowd.
In that bad crowd, do you see kind of bad mentors, kind of like older people that the young people might be connecting with that are kind of like their mentors that leading them in the wrong direction?
So I'll tell you a quick story. There's a nonprofit leader that's working in the community here in Philadelphia that I think it was when he was in his early 20s, went to prison for some crimes that he had committed. But he will tell you that his father, his uncle, some of his cousins, these are all older adults that were all part of the prison system as well, right? So whether they were stealing, whether or not they were dealing drugs, these were kind of his mentors. So by the time he got of age, it was almost like he was going into the family business, right? And so when that's all you see, and that's the way that people make their money, that becomes your life as well. And so you're influenced by the people that are around you. And so that's a typical example of someone that that's what he grew up with, and that's all he knew. And so when he became a certain age, that was just the life that he went into. And so unfortunately, went to prison. Now he's out. Now he has a nonprofit that's mentoring young folks to stay positive, get involved in things that that are more positive, whether it's a job program, whether it's other mentorship programs, and trying to help coach and mentor kids not to go down the same path.
How does adventure play a role in your work?
To me, being outside, whether it's hiking, biking, swimming, these are all things that are very important to me. Being out in nature is very important to me. And so I like to expose kids to programs where they can maybe get out of their environment, right? So whether it's taking a trip to 𝐏𝐢𝐜𝐿 Trail, going on a hiking adventure, or organizations that take kids down to the shore to go swimming, or going on a bike ride. I work with an organization that helps kids build bikes, right? And so once they build the bike, they actually get to keep the bike, right? So it's also that that visceral experience of building something that and creating something that you made, but then you own it, right? And you have something that you can take with you around the city. So though adventure, I think, plays a role because I see opportunities where we can connect with kids and take them out of their community and expose them to things that maybe they didn't get a chance to be exposed to in the past.
So for people who want to connect and help support the community of Philadelphia, why is 211 a great place for them to look into?
I think 211 is a great place to start if you're unaware of what you want to get involved in. We are funders of nonprofit organizations ourselves, right? So we fund about 100 organizations. We've given grants to folks. It's a 3-year funding cycle. It used to be 2 years, and now we've extended it to 3 years. And so every 3 years, we provide funding for about 100 different organizations, not only in Philadelphia, but also in Southern New Jersey. So we are United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. The other thing is I think United Way has a unique perspective because we're out in community. We kind of see what's going on and what the community has told us that they need. And so when someone wants to provide a donation to United Way, there's a couple different ways that they can do that. They can either provide money to a general fund and we kind of divvy it based on need, or they can pick a particular thing that they want to fund, whether it's early learning, whether they want to fund job programs, whether they want to fund family stability. They can provide funding for a particular initiative that United Way is involved in as well. And so we will take those funds and distribute it to the organizations that best kind of fit what they would like to provide funding for.
How often do you find yourself kind of interlinking two organizations together, almost connecting people that might be doing a similar craft or could help each other that might not be aware of each other otherwise? How often do you find yourself kind of connecting nonprofits with each other?
Yeah, so a couple of times a year, United Way does provide, does convening of these different organizations. So one through our summit that United Way holds yearly, and then we have other events where we bring nonprofit partners together. Right, and so they're normally grantees, right, that folks can come together and kind of get a sense what everybody else does and develop those partnerships and those relationships, because it's all important, right? Because no matter what you say, funding is always critical, right? So we want organizations to connect because sometimes they can pull their funding, right, to have a better impact. So we've got one organization that may have a good amount of funding, but another organization has a venue that can be utilized to host an event, right? And so we're always looking for organizations to partner together to make something like that happen. And so we do some convening also with Black nonprofit leaders as well to try to teach them how to become better nonprofit leaders, but also how to make their organizations stand out, right, in terms of funding, in terms of documenting their impact into the community, being able to approach funders. So that's a lot of the work that United Way is involved in.
I feel like you can go way further with that when you're pooling resources and helping each other out.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What's next for you?
What's next for me is I'm going to continue working with our 211 Violence Prevention Helpline here in Philadelphia, keeping getting the word out, but also beginning to work in some other United Way initiatives involving 211 as well. It's not just violence prevention resources. We're also have other community-based resources that we help provide for people as well. United Way is embarking on a grant program with 𝐏𝐢𝐜 to assist people with energy credits, right, to kind of reduce their energy bills. We also are involved or have been involved in digital navigation network, which is kind of decreasing that digital divide between underserved families, low-income families, helping them get digital devices and low-cost internet services. And that program has been so successful, it's actually being absorbed by the city right now. Wow. Right? And so there's a lot of different initiatives that United Way is involved in. So even though I specialize in kind of violence prevention, I've got to dip my toe in some of these other initiatives and helping to get those off the ground as well.
Where can we find you?
Well, you can find, if you want to call 2-1, you just dial the numbers 211. If you want to connect with me personally, you can do that through my email, and that's mwaller@unitedforimpact.com.
Amazing. Mike, thank you so much for coming, hanging out.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.